I don't know, it was Sunday night, so you want it for us? But
So no, just drive past it.
Sorry, but now
So we're just going to kind of direct ourselves.
I loved the bill. I'm such a dad. It was my favourite show.
Well, I've already done that.
All right. There. There's going
Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that we are meeting today on stolen land, that sovereignty was never ceded, and want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and that we're currently on the land of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We have a really exciting group of speakers tonight. Thank you everyone for coming. We did have a moderator lined up who is a journalist, so by nature she's actually been called out to report on something today. So today we'll have Ogy Simic has jumped in and is helping us out facilitate a discussion today with Tardy Ernest Williams, who's just to his left, and Ogy is our candidate for Albert Park as well. So thanks so much today, Ogy. So Tarneen is an activist with Warriors of Aboriginal Resistance and led with a bunch of other really strong black women 60,000 person rally for Invasion Day earlier this year. She has also been working with Aboriginal women to be change makers in politics with Straight Talk at Oxfam. Then we also have Adam Bent. Most of you might know Adam. So Adam is our member for Melbourne and currently holds the portfolios for climate change and energy, employment and workplace relations, science research and innovation. And then we also have Steph, who's our candidate for McNamara. So, and Melbourne, sorry. We're on the border. We're very, very close. I think we're a couple of 100 metres away from McNamara. So I'm going to hand over to Ogy, and he's going to run through facilitate discussion today. So thanks so much for coming, and yeah.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you, David, for the introduction, and thank you all for coming here tonight. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. So I too would like to start by paying my respects to the traditional owners and acknowledge that we are gathered here on Aboriginal land. We've got an incredible lineup of speakers and presenters tonight. It is so fantastic to see so many of you here tonight. It is a long weekend and quite often people are away on a long weekend, but yet so many of us have got here together tonight on this very important issue. The ABC's in what seems to be quite a bit of trouble, and it's up to us to work together to talk about what the main concerns and issues are and work together to protect the ABC. So I'll start by asking our speakers a series of questions, and then there'll be an opportunity for us to ask questions and have a discussion amongst ourselves as well. So I'll start with Steph, if that's okay. Steph Hodkins-May, the Greens candidate for McNamara. And quite obviously, the ABC is a very special broadcaster to so many of us. But I want to ask you why the ABC is so important and why we must fight to protect it.
Thanks, Ogy, and thanks everyone for joining us this evening. I suppose, like most of you, I grew up watching the ABC. Children's shows followed by Heartbreak High as a favourite in my formative years, and then more recently, growing up on a farm in Blampede, near Dalesford, my family all listened to the Country Hour, and I bumped into my uncle today, and he was mentioning still that it's sort of his day revolves around what time that program is, the Country Hour is programmed for, and it's an institution that I've never met anyone who doesn't have fond memories of how it's operating and have strong hopes for its real good future for the ABC. And just today actually reminded me, today was the anniversary of my mum's death. She was killed in some tsunami in Samoa, and it reminded me of the relationships that I forged with journalists at the ABC in Ballarat, whom almost like friends, and who really follow the journeys of people living in regional Australia, and who it's the backbone of some of the communities. And yeah, it was just a really special reminder of that today. But what I just really want to touch on is why it's so important. And I was really shocked to hear recently that 83% of the world don't have access to independent free press. That's a pretty astonishing number. 83% of the world don't really know what's happening in their own country. That really shocked me. And so I think it's important to note that free press and independent journalism is the cornerstone of a strong democracy. Democracy requires good reporting of facts. Sure, it's good to have opinion as well, but it's a really delicate balance, and we rely for us to make informed decisions and to truly judge and know that we're making an informed decision at the ballot box. We need to have the real facts before us, and that's what ABC and SBS have been so integral to in the Australian history. Also, the concentration of media in just a few hands is pretty problematic and dangerous, and so the ABC promotes diversity and allows us to see what's happening right across the world, and investigative journalism has really brought to our attention some pretty significant issues. Recently we've seen that I think the largest crowdsourced piece of journalism and investigative work based on aged care in Australia, and we've seen what's been unfolding in aged care institutions right across the country. And that's because of the ABC, and that's because of the hundreds of people that submitted their stories. But that's now resulted in a Royal Commission, and this isn't new. I think I remember, not fondly, I remember several years ago when we saw some of the horrific image of the live export trade that was happening, and how quickly our politicians were to jump on that and to respond. And for the Greens, it wasn't enough of a response, and we're still fighting to end live exports, but it really shines a light on things that perhaps our leaders really don't want a light to be shone on. So it's of critical importance in exposing corruption, giving a voice to a voice for interests other than paid interests. So yeah, I'm very concerned about what we've seen as a bit of a trend within the Liberal Party. I suppose that they're trying to soften the ground to privatise our ABC, and they're not doing it very subtly, I might add. It's one instance, I think, where the National Party, they understand the importance of the ABC, but the Liberals just cannot, they're so thin-skinned that they're unwilling to face the sort of scrutiny that the ABC is seeking to expose. And so it's really up to us to ensure that the battleground, that we remain strong, that we don't let them soften the ground, that we don't let them gradually erode the ABC's budget any more than they already have. I think some $250 million was gutted. The ABC was gutted by some $250 million, despite Tony Abbott promising in 2013 that he would not touch the ABC's budget. So it's an ongoing fight. It's a bit of an ideological battle between the corporate private interests of the big media versus our free independent journalism. And I'm really committed to ensuring that we mount the sort of community campaign that is needed to protect independent journalism and to protect our press institutions for my viewing pleasure, and that of my child, who I really hope can grow up in a world where you can turn on the TV and get some real fact-based journalism. So, yeah.
Thanks, Steph. That's a really good introduction to our forum tonight, and we'll return to this topic and discuss it in more detail throughout our discussion tonight. But I might turn to Adam Bank now, if that's okay. And we've seen the ABC in the media quite a lot over the last week and last few weeks, and publicly seen incidents of the independence being brought into question. So what I want to ask you, Adam, is do you think that the independence of the ABC is being compromised?
I think the independence of the staff hasn't been compromised, but the independence of management and the directorship has been. And I think we've kind of been, this is lifting the lid on what is usually a closed box, and now we're getting a sense of exactly what has gone on behind the scenes. And if there's anything good to come out of this, it's like the operations of how senior levels of government, who are basically taking their writing instructions from the corporate sector, including from Rupert Murdoch, who we'll come back to in a moment, this is how they operate. And when the chair of the board is reported to have, or what says when he was on interviewed on ABC, when he says, look, you've got to understand, you can't keep, when someone is funding you and someone is giving you money, you can't keep doing things that annoy them. Well, that's basically what he said. He said that several times over. Shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what the ABC is meant to be about, and suggests that he's probably actually never read the Act or read the Charter. And so now that we know someone like that thinks that, that's why we were the first ones out of the blocks in terms of the political party saying he's got to go, and I'm glad he's gone. But I think actually the whole board needs to go at the moment. Because one of the things that we've learnt from the last little while is, again, everyone's still piecing it together, but on one sequence of events, the whole board was told several days before Michelle Guthrie was sacked that one of the reasons that the whole dispute had arisen was because she'd been instructed/requested to sack particular staff members. Now, we're going to find out, like this, and there's obviously a whole of other reasons as well. This isn't about mounting a defence of any particular person, Michelle Guthrie or anyone else, but if that's right, if the board knew that there were claims that she'd been asked to sack an individual person, whatever the board thought about whether or not she should go, that should have rung alarm bells, right? Hang on, that's not the chair's, the chair's job is not to come in and say, I want someone sacked because the Prime Minister has complained about them. Yes, have a discussion, maybe so-and-so shouldn't, we've got problems with so-and-so, that's what you expect boards to do, but not because the Prime Minister has had a private meeting and asked you to do it. So I think at the moment the whole board's compromised, and I think there's a case to restore independence. The board needs to go, and then we need to find a cross-parliamentary, cross-partisan way of appointing a new board so that there can't be any suggestion that it's partisan, otherwise we're just going to have the same thing repeating itself. And one of the things that governments do when they're on the nose, and it looks like they're about to be kicked out, is make a whole lot of appointments at the last minute to positions so that the next lot are stuck with them. And I think one of the most important tasks now is finding a way of making sure they don't stack the board or restack the board. The two other things I think have but have also been part of the project of trying to compromise integrity and independence. One is the one that Steph alluded to, which is money, and if you look at the BBC, right? Look at the BBC and think about what the ABC would be like if it was well resourced. Obviously, we don't have the same level of resources as the UK government. Well resourced and given the capacity to go out and try and represent Australia in the region, to the world, to home. You can see the kind of amazing things that we can do, and instead. I understand it's like when you add up all the efficiency dividends, it's even topped the 250 million. It's up over 300 million now that Abbott, Turnbull and Morrison's treasurer have cut from it. They found 30 million to give to Rupert Murdoch to give to Foxtel, but they found $500 million for the refund, as Steph is reminding me. But they got it, and when you pull 300 million out of a public broadcaster, those things start to bite, and that compromises it. And it has potentially a chilling effect, especially if, as you find out at the same time, you've got the chair breathing down your neck saying, we pulled your money, and if you keep going, it might be worse. That's the inference that you could draw. So the money is, then we've got to find a way of getting the funding for the ABC kind of taken as much as possible outside the political cycle and outside the electoral cycle. But the last thing I'll finish on this, that you've got to remember that in order to get the company tax cuts passed, the government did a deal with One Nation. And some of the things that the One Nation wanted included reforms to the way the ABC was run. And so there's now 3 bills before the Senate that are currently on the notice paper, due to be debated when we go back, that affect the way that the ABC operates. One of them, it talks about changing the ABC charter, and it says we've got to insert the words fair and balanced into it. Now, you think fair and balanced, what's wrong with being fair and balanced? A, the ABC Charter already includes obligations around accuracy and impartiality, so that's actually really good there. B, fair and balanced is the tagline for Fox News in the US, right? They've pinched it from there. And C, the reason they've done it, the reason that people like One Nation are pushing for this is that in their mind, there's a difference between accurate, which is what's in the ABC Charter at the moment, and balanced. And for someone from One Nation, balanced means you've got to have someone who believes in the science of climate change, and you've got to have someone who doesn't. Like, that's balance. Like, put two views equally. You have the science view, you have the anti-science view. So accuracy goes out the window, and it's just like, let's just give every viewpoint equal merit, even if it actually doesn't have any. And the government, this isn't a One Nation bill, the government is putting this bill up, right? The government is putting this bill up and is wanting it debated. So we've still got, when we go back, once we find a way out of this saga, that's hopefully a way of ensuring that it stays impartial, we've still got those other two big issues of making sure it's resourced well enough to stand up to the Murdochs, and also making sure its charter isn't mucked around with by Parliament.
Thanks, Adam. You spoke about the board, and obviously the board wields a lot of power and sets the direction for the ABC. I'm just wondering if you can elaborate a little bit on how the board's currently appointed, and you alluded to potential different models of appointing the board.
There's a committee that, or a group that is meant to makes recommendations to the government to appoint people to the board, and the government then appoints someone to the board. The government, first thing they did was stack that committee and put Janet Albrecht, and I don't know if people know Janet Albrecht, and sort of a far-right columnist and some others on there. That committee has made a number of recommendations, even with Janet Albrecht on, and that wasn't enough for the government. So the government overrode that and has made its own appointments, even appointments, as I understand it, as I've been told, even appointments that panel that has Janet Albrecht on it didn't approve of and said should not be appointed. And so to give you an idea of the kind of people the government has appointed, they've appointed a former head, certainly a senior operative from the Minerals Council to the board, right? So that's who sits on the board of the ABC at the moment. And at the moment, apart from one person who's got a background in PR, my understanding is that there's no one on the board who's got any background in journalism. Right, this is who they've put in charge. It's just corporate mates, basically. And so at the moment, what should be, so even with this supposedly independent panel, it's only recommendatory in nature, and it's just been overruled. So I think we've got to have now do a bit of a deep think about what other models might be. One could be that you require a certain proportion of Parliament, like a parliamentary vote that's bigger than just a simple 50% that is needed to approve it. Another could be having a multi-party committee that's got some independence on it and all the parties, and basically saying you've got to come up with a consensus to approve something. Another might be to say that this independent panel that recommends board appointments, that's somehow binding, so that a minister can't overrule it if an independent panel has come up. So there's a few ideas that are kicking around at the moment, and that's sort of going to be one of our top priorities when we go back to.
Great, thank you.
Can I just add on that? I also read that I think the Australia Institute suggested that perhaps the public could vote on one of those board members' roles, so their profiles and CVs get uploaded online and the public choose, which I thought was quite a novel idea.
Yeah, maybe we have to have a postal ballot. So
God, it'd all be quite funny if we weren't so serious. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Steph. Tanine, thank you for coming tonight. It's fantastic to have you part of our panel. And we've spent so far quite a bit of time talking about the ABC, but I'm interested to look at some of the subsidiaries of the ABC, NITV and Triple J, and ask you, as a young indigenous activist, how these broadcasters support the work that you've been doing.
Yeah, so over the last few years, lots of my work has been organising rallies around justice for Aboriginal people. So Invasion Day, Justice for Elijah, and also Aboriginal deaths in custody rallies, and also the Jack Wrong Trees. But I think, yeah, some of the stuff that which I really appreciate with ABC is that I think that so many times it always happens. Like I think when we were campaigning to stop the forced closures of Aboriginal communities back in 2015, on the front of the Herald Sun it was selfish rabble, because we were protesting to save Aboriginal people in remote communities in WA and Northern Territory. And like if you look at the ABC and the way that they project our voices through that, and especially like the Aboriginal journalists that sit inside those institutions, and the way that they report Aboriginal voices is really important, and it's really helpful for me, especially after Invasion Day this year, and the amount of violence, threats I got from journalists, from the Daily Mail, the Australian, and multiple different media outlets, was like the Aboriginal journalists that was working at SBS and ABC that were calling me up and having chats to me about what's happening, and actually asking me what did I say, what did I mean, reporting what I'd meant, and those things that are really important when you are positioned as public enemy number one when white supremacists are after you here in Australia. So I think that, I think with Triple J, I think I'm pretty critical of them because of their Change the Date campaign. It actually, they did do it for the whole weekend, but actually didn't mention why. Yes. There was actually no substance to why they were changing the date to the weekend. And I think that sometimes organisations like that can really even water down Aboriginal people's messaging, and it might be really strong and mean a lot, but then it can really get watered down as well. And which really sucks because Aboriginal people have such strong voices and have really important things to say, and it can mean a lot, but then can also be watered down and not be as strong, and not mean what it was actually meant. And I think that also comes back to not having Aboriginal people telling Aboriginal stories and reporting Aboriginal stories, because that's also going to happen, because when people don't understand and don't have context of Aboriginal people or don't have the lived experience, they're not able to tell a story in the right way because of that. So I really do give it up to the Aboriginal journalists who support my work, and also so many other Aboriginal people's work, like the ABC doing Black Comedy and Mystery Road, being able to see Aboriginal people represented in television, but as in these shows is really amazing. And if you haven't watched Black Comedy, I highly suggest it.
And Mystery Road.
Mystery Road's really good. Drama. But yeah, I think that it's just, ABC has been really great. I was watching maybe 2 weeks ago before Black Comedy came out. Basically, it never went to air, but Gary Foley still has them, and I was watching it, and just how great that old Black Comedy was, and being able to access that from the 70s is really cool. So
yeah, great. No, I definitely agree with you that if it were not for the independent broadcaster, some of the messages would definitely not get out there. But the point you also make, we have to be really careful, particularly when we talk about Aboriginal issues, that Aboriginal people would have the opportunity to speak for themselves instead of us speaking on their behalf. Very interesting points, and I'm sure we'll get to elaborate on that a little bit further tonight. Before we move on, I'd like to ask Steph another question. I think it's a question that we're probably all burning to know. Adam Banks already in Parliament, but Steph, if you are elected to Parliament, what will you do to help save our broadcaster?
Yeah, look, I think some of the points that Adam touched on are certainly pretty central. We need to make sure that the board isn't stacked, and I'd work very closely with Adam to prevent that. Campaigning locally and suppose right across Victoria to ensure that they know that they're on notice and that we aren't going to stand for greater budget cuts. Campaigning, we've got some pretty marginal seats the Greens do right across Melbourne, so supporting those campaign teams, because the more Greens we've got in Parliament, the more chance we've got of stopping some of these huge budget cuts, but also supporting the arts more broadly. I think your point about some of the great Australian content, we need to be making more of it, and I've pretty much exhausted all the content on ABC on demand and SBS, and I'm looking for some more, so out of self-interest as well. But yeah, I think that holding events like this, rallying as often as we need to rally, working with friends of ABC who I know do a terrific job at keeping the pressure on. Here in Macnamara, we haven't had a particularly supportive member of the ALP who he himself has been quite critical of the ABC, and in particular in questioning the integrity of journalists in the Middle East, and using taxpayer funds to basically condemn her and the work of the ABC. So you won't, so I'll certainly be standing up to that sort of nonsense, and ensuring that we continue to run the strong campaign that needs to be run to preserve free press here in Australia.
Thank you, Steph. Who's excited? Great. All right. Well, thank you to the panel. Over to you now, and we'll take questions from the audience. So does anyone have any burning questions that they'd like to kick off with? All right. We've got Lorna at the back. Thank you, Lorna.
Yeah. I still see the dilemma with the money. So if governments have the power to allocate money to the ABC, it's really hard to not to be worried about what they think. Whether you do anything about what they think is another thing, but the fact is, if they don't like you, they can just keep producing the money. So what does one do?
Well, let's not forget, as Steph alluded to, that we now know that the Liberal Party's policy is to privatise the ABC. Like this is no longer might they do it. They have passed a resolution at their National Federal Council that their party policy now is to privatise the ABC. Not one minister spoke against it. Right? So we know that's what they want to do. And they, at the end of the day, yes, you can keep Parliament sovereign, so Parliament can cut budgets, but the simple answer is if governments do things you don't like, you vote them out, right? And so there are some things that we could do to protect the ABC a bit better, including potentially putting its funding in legislation, so that it's not necessarily a decision of the executive arm of government, but you need to come back to Parliament in order to cut it. So you can do some things that would give it a bit of added protection. Of course, if you end up in a situation where, as were with John Howard, where he controls both houses of Parliament, they could change the law. But that's life in democracy. So there's some things we can do to build in a bit of extra pressure. But the main thing I think we've got to do is turn it into a vote changing issue. And that's at the moment, like the campaigns that are being run, like the Melbourne Town Hall rally to save the ABC was huge. It was just massive. And one of the things we've got to do, though, is make sure that we get to everyone who watches ABC on iView, but may never have watched it on television. And because there's like, if that's been your method of getting ABC and you're younger, then those people don't necessarily might not have the same historical attachment to the ABC. And so how do we make it a vote changing issue for them? And I think one way of doing that is to make sure people know that one of the government's plans, they haven't been explicit about it, but I feel fairly sure that they want to put iView behind a paywall. So that, because the commercial networks are forever coming in and complaining and saying, well, how can we deliver content to match it when you, the government, are doing it there for free? So the government, I reckon, will jump at the chance to put iView behind the paywall, and we're going to get that message out there.
Very scary stuff. Adam, just while we're at Parliament House, where do the other parties sit on the ABC? With obviously some support from the Labor Party. What about some of the other minor parties?
Well, so far I think the Centre Alliance Party had spoken against cuts. The big One Nation and the sort of ones on the right going hell for leather to try and stop it. One of the big tests will be if this bill around changing the ABC's charter comes up, and it'll be an opportunity to start. Like, I don't know where Darren Hitch sits, for example. Like, it'll be an opportunity for us all to sort of put the effort on a little bit.
Thank you, AJ, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm curious if we do end up with a privatised ABC, are we still going to see the same types of like quality journalism, for instance? Because that's my biggest fear, is that I'm not sure there is a market on 7 or 10 for shows like Q&A. So if we lose the ABC, do we lose those shows?
Good question. Yep. I think that is a comment. Colin?
One argument that we might hear from the opposition in answer to that very question is that the public broadcasting service in the United States is, I don't quite know how well it compares with the ABC, but at least it's competitive in the quality of what it produces and the range of stuff. But the point surely is that it is relying on subscriptions from all sorts of private sources and a very small amount of government money from a country where the population went 10 times ours, something like that. With a population that size, you can get away with it and get a reasonable sort of a public broadcaster on a private, pretty well non-government supported basis. But I don't think you can do it in Australia. Now, I did want to raise a suggestion. We used to have broadcast listeners' licences. I'm old enough to remember them, although I was only a kid at the time. But somewhere along the line they got abolished. I think it might have been by Whitlam, in fact. Britain's got, the BBC have got a budget of about $6 billion a year compared to our $1 billion. For, I would think, a rather smaller sort of a broadcasting job. We've got to get the broadcast out to an entire continent. Is there a case for bringing back broadcast listeners' licences of some sort?
Any of you familiar with the broadcasters, or should we ask Colin to elaborate a little bit on what
I think we have to have a discussion about what government is for. Like, what is the point of government? Right? And one of the things that I think government is for is making sure democracy can continue and holding powerful interests to account and doing things that are in the public interest but don't necessarily make a buck. Right? And for me, like, if you think about, Steph mentioned this in her speech, but look at who controls the media now, look at the fate of Fairfax, the way that that's going. Can you imagine if Rupert Murdoch has even more control over media in this country? That is what I actually think it's government, and through government the ABC, that stands between us and that at the moment. And I think that one of the best ways, so if you accept that government is about doing things that are in the public good but that don't necessarily make money, and government's about preserving democracy, and government's about empowering the citizenry, then it's a legitimate call on public funds to fund an independent broadcaster, even though it's going to do things that government doesn't like from time to time. So it then becomes a question, like, if you accept that that's a legitimate thing for government to do, and the Liberals don't, by the way, they clearly think it should be privatised. Right? So the Liberals don't think, so we've got a fork in the road situation about what government's for. Then the question is, what's the fairest way to fund it? Now, one of the problems with universal licences is it almost becomes user pays, and so someone who's on $200,000 a year pays the same as someone who's on $30,000 a year. And depending on how it's done, like you might be able to do it in a differential and charged way. But if you have a system where you're asking corporations to pay their fair share of tax and you're asking the wealthy to pay their fair share of tax, then that's a good thing for government to spend its money on. So I would rather, I guess, say it's wrong that 1 in 3 of Australia's biggest corporations pays no tax. Let's make them pay some tax. Let's make millionaires pay a minimum amount of tax. Have a Buffett rule in Australia, like there has been discussed elsewhere, and then use that money to fund the ABC. That'd be my preference, because I think it's a fairer way of doing it.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, Joe.
Just a question about over the past 12-18 months, the ABC has collaborated with Fairfax on a couple of investigations that have featured in a Four Corners program. Do you think that's the model for the future, or do you think that has hairs on it and prejudices the independence of the ABC?
You are.
Yeah, Adam Band, or anyone who wants to.
Well, I'll go first. I don't mind it. As long. A good thing about it is that ABC doesn't have a print version, and like the lines are just becoming completely blurred now. Like, what's the difference between going to ABC online to check the news versus going to the Age website to check the news? But it still I think does have a niche. So until the ABC has the equivalent of a newspaper, which would need a lot more money to do, I think pairing with media outlets, as long as it doesn't compromise the integrity of it, is okay. And I kind of don't mind. I wouldn't, I'm going to say this too often, but I wouldn't mind if they partnered with another outlet, even though it might be owned by someone I didn't like, provided to compromise the quality of the journalism. I don't think it's too bad with a paper. I think it would be bad if they start doing cross promotions with Channel 7. I don't think that would be a good idea.
We've got Media Watch too to keep an eye on what ABC is doing. I tend to agree, as long as it's transparent, we know who's behind the story and stands up to test of reasonable reporting and credible witnesses and both sides of the stories. I suppose, I don't have a problem with it.
Can I ask sort of something that Tane said during her speech? Was, why do you think Triple J didn't explain why they went ahead?
I think it's that people just, I don't know, there's like such a huge opportunity to educate people and they just didn't take it.
Yeah.
It's really disappointing. But I think that people are just scared, and I think they're scared of reactions or consequences. And I think that, like with this, I know with the state of the government at the moment, I really think that with all these, even the new laws around protesting and the 3,000 new police that are that the Andrews government have brought out in the last year is for this. It's like, you know, they can feel there's something happening. They can feel that there's going to be something different. So I feel like they're just like trying to keep a lid on it.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, this, like, with trying to control media is, you know, we all know that it tries to control people's minds and make me out to be public enemy number one and like this crazy black woman. So, you know, seeing that it's really huge, and I think that it's just another thing of control. And like when this country was about divide and conquer, it's just an extension of that.
Repeated attempts to ban protests on public land, and you know, funding private schools over public schools, and it's all part of this attack on an educated, well-informed population, and because they know that when people are well-informed, they're not particularly happy with what they're doing. So.
And I wonder to what extent fear also sells stories, because we had some experience with Australia Day on Council, where the City of Port Phillip and I moved a motion for us to consult with the Aboriginal community to hear their views on how council celebrates Australia Day. And the Liberals used that as an opportunity to go to the media and tell them that Councillor Simic was trying to cancel Australia Day and take away from them the day that they cherish the most. And so we saw that from quite a hostile local media, the local, the Leader newspaper, which then also publishes to the Herald Sun, that on that particular issue, what they were saying did influence the outcome that we eventually got in council. So that's absolutely something that we have to watch out for. Yeah. Thank you for standing up for that issue in particular. Should we see some more questions, Paul?
Yeah, on the funding side, it'd be really nice in the discussions from government generally if instead of using percentages and then gross numbers and all the rest of it, is if they did it as a proportion of the population, because, you know, we're spending more on education while there's more people, so what do you think we're going to be doing, right? So they use numbers in, you know, mysterious ways to...
Crime rates increasing.
Exactly, so it all becomes very silly. So if you went back to the 8 cents a day, I think I read that would actually, they'd have, you know, double the money they've got now based on the population. But then the quid pro quo of reducing their funding has been maybe that these issues with the journalists, you know, getting, you know, having things get through perhaps because there wasn't enough editorial overview, because there wasn't money for those people to be part of the group to, you know, see what was being said before it was published or whatever. So you sort of end up with the bad result, which we've seen, is called such drama. So that message is, you've got to fund something enough to enable it to function well and to give us what we're after. So that message on the funding side first, rather than just gross numbers or percentages or some things which just muddy the waters. We've got to get that clear, and that's, I think, got to be the Greens' part to try and get that clarity. But the second one is to try and get people to realise that you've got to have a certain gravitas in an organisation, enough people to enable it to function effectively. And I mean, it's like Parliament, I suppose, with our increasing population. Maybe we need more parliamentarians. I mean, that's coming up too, isn't it?
Just on that point, I was in Israel last year and met with a friend of Sophie McNeil, the journalist who was attacked by Michael Danby, and her colleague was telling me how extraordinary her work is, and she's got a young child and family over there, and she basically takes a camera everywhere she goes, travelling right across the Middle East, setting it up on a chair and recording it herself, doing all of this incredible journalism abroad by herself with her webcam. And, you know, it looks so professional, but they're bare bones, really, and the phenomenal work those journalists do. And sometimes we get a bit frustrated when, you know, outlets won't send a camera or you know, cover the story, but they say to us, we want to, we're at that place and we've only got, you know, our staff are being so dramatic, we can't cover everything we want to cover, and it's a real shame, but hats off to the journalists that are, you know, doing the hard slog with very little resources.
Very good point. All right, David.
I have a question. Tanya, you mentioned black comedy. I also love black comedy. I think it's really awesome to see young Aboriginal writers like Nikki Lou and Nick Gori on the ABC. I'm so really interested to hear what your vision is for your community, for a public broadcaster. Like, what do you want to see from our public broadcaster? And then also, I think I'd really love to hear everyone's favourite TV show on the ABC. If it's not black comedy, what is it?
I think, I don't know, like what I would like is, and I really do like NITV, like they do sit in the SBS office in Sydney, but I think, I don't know, I feel like Aboriginal people should be more independent. They should have an office outside of that, and I feel like they should have more control over what they want to report and not be like just reporting or being able to report or even make opinions about things that, like, you know, sometimes you can only go so far, which is really frustrating. But yeah, I think that within a public broadcaster, I yeah, I really do love NITV and all the work that they do. And I don't know, like, but yeah, I think I really do, like, I really want, like, I would like ABC to be a lot more like NITV and have, like, more stand out, their work stand out more within Aboriginal people within that institution, because working with people from NITV, the journalists there, I feel like if they're more notable, like, you know who they are. I have a relationship with most of them, so I really would like Aboriginal journalists or the ABC to have like a whole team and like a whole section, because I have ABC Indigenous, but it's not as owned by Aboriginal people, if that makes sense.
So we've got obviously some NITV is a really good example of Aboriginal people being able to speak for themselves. What would you see as the impact of cuts to NITV? How would you respond to that, and what would be the broader impact on our community as a result, from your point of view?
There'd be so many people's voices that you wouldn't hear. Like, you know, even just, I know there's just so many voices that you wouldn't hear. So many Aboriginal people from around the country, like Rachel Hocking, who was going to moderate tonight. You know, she travels all around the country, and also Madeline, who does Melbourne, but she does so much great reporting as well in Melbourne and Sydney, and meets with so many different Aboriginal people. Like, they really do, like you were talking about, Steph, they don't have many resources, but they just really stretch them out, and they do everything possible to hear so many people's voices and make it their own, and make people's voices really strong and independent. I think another person as well would be Nakari Thorpe, she's a journalist up in Canberra. For NITV, like, it's just, it'd be really disappointing, because there just wouldn't be Aboriginal people reporting. Like, she got interviewed the Prime Minister last year, and you know how many Aboriginal people get to interview the Prime Minister, whether we agree with him or not.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, some of the issues as well that just wouldn't get the coverage. One of the opportunities I've had in the Greens is to work with Senator Rachel Siewert, who said the Australian portfolio for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander affairs, and Rachel managed to get the third ever Greens private members bill through Parliament, and it was to do with opal fuel and making it possible for the Minister to designate areas where opal fuel was necessary. And NITV was first there to actually report on that, and there was some reporting across the ABC, and I have to say that many other outlets didn't really pay attention to that incredibly important issue.
I'm wondering if when you hold the balance of power, you'll be committing to the extra $500 million that's for the jet streaming service to bring the ABC. It's a bit contentious between Justin and Michelle Guthrie, but whether you'd be happy to support the extra $500 million for that, the jet streaming technology service, and whether you'd replace the $350 million plus that Steph mentioned earlier, whether you're committed to replacing that so that the ABC can get on track again.
On the second question, yes, and in fact we've gone to every election, certainly for as long as I've been in Parliament, of aiming not only to reverse any cuts but to actually substantially increase ABC and SBS funding, and that was an election commitment for us last time as well. As regards to the jet stream, I have to take that on notice to get back and talk to Sarah Hanson-Young, who's our communications spokesperson, about that. I don't know that we've made a commitment specifically around that. We've certainly said reverse the cuts, but in terms of the jet stream in particular, I don't know. And I expect that we'll go to the election again with a platform of not only reversing cuts but increasing funding. But I just have to take that on notice. Yeah.
Thank you. So, we've still got a few minutes, so we can entertain a few more questions. Anne?
Yeah, I just wondered what a strategy to save the ABC would look like, and
who might be the key players and, you know, who are the good individuals? I know that's so but the role of the staff, the unions, perhaps different people in the parliament. How do you reckon it's all going to come together? And I suppose my other question is, how can we make sure that the board isn't replaced until we get a Labor government?
In relation to the first part of the question, I think marginal seats and ABC, friends of ABC's work campaigning in marginal seats is the key. If questions about the ABC are being asked, I think 3 in 4 people say they want to a strong independent ABC, and if questions are being directly asked of the Liberal candidates in those marginal seats and significant pressure being placed on them, I think top officers are going to be hearing about that. And we do have a particularly vocal Senator, James Paterson from the IPA in our electorate, and he's not making any secrets of his desires to privatise, but they're, for example, trying to present a progressive Liberal in our area because it's a progressive electorate, and I'm very certain she doesn't really want to be talking about privatising the ABC, so we need to put the pressure on so voters really know what they're going to potentially get after if the coalition stay in Parliament. So marginal seats is, for me, strong campaigns in marginal seats is a really key part of that. And getting a commitment before the election that we're not going to see future funding cuts, although that happened last time and we did. So, Adam, have you got any more?
Yes, Adam, what's happening in Parliament?
I agree with the analysis, and I think that we're in a good position at the moment in that it looks like the government's going to lose the next election, and which makes me feel very happy. And in order to hold on to seats, they're turfing their leaders out and changing the prime ministership, and they're ditching policies left, right and centre that they think are unpopular. So pension age, company tax, they're doing whatever they have to, whatever they think will help them win votes. And our task is to elevate this to be one of those things that they decide to chuck overboard. It was nice when we thought Tony Abbott was our saviour, but turns out people don't want it, so we better ditch it. And so I think what Steph said is spot on. It's like in those marginal seats, make the Liberal candidate come up with a better position, and the only way they'll come up with a better position is if head office comes up with a better position. What was the other part of how do we do it before they... I think a key... what's happened in a lot of things in this parliament, in several parliaments, is that we've gone out there and argued for something, and it's taken a little while, but eventually the others have come on board with it, or at least some of the others have come on board with it. And it's happened with the ABC, as I said, first out of the block saying one's got to go, and eventually Labor came around. I think trying to put some pressure on Labor to say you've got to start making a commitment now about not potentially even overturning some appointments. If the Liberals make appointments in the dying days of their government, you've got to come out and be clear now that you will seek to overturn them so that we can get to some semblance of balance is going to be key. So it's a bit like Adani, the Adani campaign. If Bill Shorten came out now and said, if I get elected, I'll place the whole mine under review, then it wouldn't get financing and it wouldn't go ahead. So it's actually, when you're the alternative Prime Minister in waiting, the Prime Minister in waiting of the country, announcements that you make can have big impacts. And so if we can put pressure on Labor to come up with a better position, then I think we can stop anything happening before the election.
Adam, realistically, how much time have we got? Do we have enough time to wait until the next election? What sort of damage will the government try to do before the election? And how do we fend off?
I've seen what they're trying to do. And they'll sell it off if they can. And if they can't sell it off, they'll try and get journalists that criticise them sacked, and they'll get programs like Tonightly taken off air, and they'll continue to do an enormous amount of damage. But as I say, if there's any silver lining like this, I haven't seen an implosion like this at the ABC in my life. like maybe others who've been watching this more closely or for longer than I have, but like this is unprecedented, right? And politics is so tumultuous at the moment that maybe this just passes as another one of those normal things, but it's not. Like this hasn't happened at the ABC before. Yeah, there's been claims of are they leading too far one way or the other. Never like this. So they've come in over the top and they've charged and they said, right, come with me, and the whole cavalry is charged and they've had a go. And it's kind of blowing up spectacularly in their faces at the moment. So it's actually, yeah, it might seem like they've got the opportunity to do a lot of damage, but this is really stuffing up for them. This is really stuffing up for them. And if we can use this moment to press home that people don't want it and they're going to lose government in part because of how they've treated the ABC, then potentially we can stop it from ever happening again.
Yeah,
It's also making me think, like, yeah, we can be applying some pressure on the Nats as well, calling, lobbying, getting people you know who live in those national electorates to seek meetings and really put the pressure on, because they're not going. Coalition aren't going to want that thorn in their side if the Nats digging in on it publicly either. So,
And Tani, what would you say is the role of civil society also in fighting for national broadcasters?
Yeah, I think it's just about getting creative and like using different tactics, and I think that so often we rely on just government and where we can create change. Ourselves on the streets or however people would like to do it. So I think people definitely have a big role, and I think what happened, like I think that we can control a lot of things from the outside, and I think for me, I feel like we shouldn't just depend on government. I think we should definitely go out there and do work ourselves outside.
absolutely.
Absolutely. All right, we probably have time for one more question. John, and then we might wrap up.
Yeah, you hear a lot about people talking about the cost of education, the cost of the ABC. A much bigger question, of course, is the cost of not funding them. Right? It's all right to say, like, oh, can we, like in one of the richest countries in the world, we can afford to fund them.
Yeah.
Well said. And just a little point on that, now that we're living in such a digital age, and I know for me, the sort of news that I'm seeing coming through my feed is so filtered, and there's no real gatekeeper, I suppose, and not to... Basically, I feel like I'm being adjudicated to what sort of news I should and shouldn't consume, and that's the importance of the ABC for me. I know that I can turn it on and I'm going to get wide coverage of all the different issues. I'm not getting this pre-packaged little algorithm-based piece of news consumption that's not giving me the big picture, and that it's kind of keeping me in my narrow echo chamber. So I don't know, the ABC, and that's something else I've been thinking about, is how we can ensure that the news we're getting is wide reaching. It's not completely algorithmed down to a point where we're all thinking the same and talking the same, and not thinking outside the algorithm.
That's a very good point. Julian?
Two things. One, if the ABC goes in some way, are there other services that can step into place, such as the Guardian? Is that more or less equivalent? And the other, if there's another completely different question, is that if campaigners in any level work to campaign and not to have a Liberal government, is the ABC or Stop Adani or what other issue is the strongest issue to put at the top of the list? So on one hand, I want to make life, get rid of global warming issues and Stop Adani, but is a stronger issue to campaign on the ABC rather than climate issues to stop the Liberals as a method to stop climate change? We campaign on ABC to stop climate change.
Great questions, Julian. Steph?
I intend to campaign on both, and I think that we're fortunate that we do have other bodies such as Stop Adani and such as Friends of ABC who are doing similar. I think people perhaps relate more to the ABC in day-to-day life and what it would mean not to be able to turn on a channel and see what they want to see. We can turn on the news and see some of these extreme weather events that are happening across the world, but I think there's a bit more of a gap in people making those connections. So I think the immediacy of ABC and the relatability of growing up watching it and the idea that it's going to be taken away from us is a very powerful campaign. but as a Green, I got involved with the Greens because of climate change and environment. So yeah, I intend to be campaigning on both. Yeah, and
but how do you rank them all at the first point of call when you contact someone in the street and you want them to not vote Liberal? You know, the old lady down the street. You're talking about climate change or the ABC? That's yeah.
Case by case.
What would you say, Adam?
I think for some people, I think it depends, and I think for some people, and in some seats, in some marginal seats, the ABC might be more important. There might be other issues, like Medicare might be more important than climate change for people as well. So I think it's going to be a bit of horses for courses.
How do we ensure that Aboriginal issues are also election issues and something that our politicians think about and talk about in the course of the election?
I think it's just like I don't know, just listening to Aboriginal people, consuming Aboriginal media, like Indigenous X is also out there as well. But I think the question.
So how do we make sure that Aboriginal issues are election issues as well?
Yeah, I think that just elevating Aboriginal people's voices, I think, is most important. Like, I think that is one of the biggest things is, not doing it for Aboriginal people, like actually just listening and like working with Aboriginal people, is like really important because like our voices need to be elevated. But as well, just thinking like from your question before, I think that with the ABC stuff as well, like I think one of the biggest things is like there's literally Nazis in government, like and like that is massive, and I think that I think it's really important that everybody does different things, and I think that we need to be creative and do cover campaigns that we want to, or whatever. But I think that the biggest thing is for real, there is actual Nazis in there, and like that is one of the issues, and we need to, because otherwise if we're just trying to just save the ABC, it's like another band-aid fix, and we're not actually getting to the root cause, and we need to concentrate on that, otherwise it's just going to keep happening, and it won't just be the ABC, it will be everything else, and we won't have the society that we have now. I'm not saying this one's perfect, but it's definitely not. But and I think that we really do need to start concentrating on the core and root issues, because otherwise we're just going to be campaigning constantly for the little things and the band-aid fixes, and that's just doesn't work. But also coming back to that one, I think, as well as thinking before, there's no justice in stolen land, and so there's literally no justice for anybody, unless there's justice for Aboriginal people and First people of this country. So, always keeping Aboriginal people at the forefront of people's minds, because if we're campaigning for queer rights or refugees and asylum seekers, then make sure that you're campaigning for Aboriginal people too, because there's literally no justice in stolen land. And that's
when are you going to be rallying next year?
Yeah, I wonder if I'll be there next year. But yeah.
100,000.
Yeah.
100,000. Thank you. This has been such a fantastic discussion. There'll be an opportunity for us to continue discussing and talking and elaborating over some food which has been prepared by some of the volunteers. We might bring the event to a close. Before we do that though, I would turn to each of the speakers and give them an opportunity for any final reflections which they might want to share with us, and also to end on that question which David put to us, what your favourite program on our independent broadcasters is. So we might kick off this way if that's okay. Any final reflections and your favourite program? Heard them at the start. Are there any others?
I don't know. I've watched black comedy 3 times in 2 weeks. It's definitely taken the cake.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming tonight.
Thanks everyone. It's a great discussion, and it's nice to know that as many people come out on a long weekend. I think it's so. Thanks for doing it. The last 2 things that I've binge watched on iView were Rosehaven and the catering show. And They're both really good. And in terms of favourite show, sort of, I guess, of broadcasting on air at the moment, now that John Clark is no longer with us, for me it's mad as hell. I'd kind of probably crawl over broken glass to watch Sean McAuliffe on ABC. On ABC, he's so much better than on commercial shows, and I just, so that's it for me.
Oh gosh, at the risk of sounding like a complete dag, potentially losing votes, when I turn on the ABC, I like to sometimes zone out, and the Antiques Row show does calm me down. It's tough between that and Grand Designs. I do love Grand Designs as well, so they're my kind of sit back and like completely zone out and watch people smile with glee as they're told that their teacup is worth. But yeah, no, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. This won't be the last you'll hear from us, certainly on our Protect the Press campaign here in Melbourne and also in Macnamara. So yeah, I think most of you have already signed in this evening. You probably will get a follow-up call from us about an upcoming event that we'll be hosting, and please do come along. Please do help us keep this issue front and centre as we head into the both state and federal elections. Got to keep the pressure on, and look forward to campaigning with you. So thanks for coming out tonight.
Thank you. Thanks also to David and AJ and everyone involved in organising today. And particularly if you want to get involved in the campaign and aren't already involved, David is the person to see, or any of the other people wearing a Greens t-shirt can point you in the direction of the Macnamara campaign, and also the campaign for Bring Back Melbourne to get another term. Thank you everyone. Please join us for some nibbles.
I also mentioned that you can join the Friends, used to be called the Friends of the ABC. I think the name's changed slightly, but I'm sure
there's some membership forms out there.
Yeah, there's forms out on the table.
Good vote.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's really just one of those things.